The reservation is confirmed for 7, haha. This person will be seated separately, please. That voice ringing out cheerfully belonged to my mother-in-law, a woman who relishes giving me a hard time. But that's all going to end today. Knowing a secret, I've decided to expose everything in front of all our relatives. My name is Emily. I'm a 28-year-old chef. After graduating from culinary school, I found work in a well-known Western restaurant, where I met my husband, Chris, who was a regular customer. My husband runs a family-owned electronics store in our local area, which has been in his family for 3 generations. Last year, after his father passed away, Chris formally took over as the 3rd-generation owner of the store. As for me, I come from a very ordinary household, but my father, mother, and my elder brother are all chefs like me. Perhaps because of that, I've had many opportunities to cook since I was a child, along with my natural talent. I graduated at the top of my class from culinary school. I am rather shy, but cooking has always been my pride and joy. At least, that was the case before I married Chris. As soon as we got married, I started living with my mother-in-law. Chris has always lived at home, and his father's death was still recent, so he pleaded with me to move in because he was worried about his mother. I was looking forward to our married life. I knew that since Chris was the eldest son, we would have to live with his mother someday, but I never thought it would happen this soon. I thought I should have told him about my reservations before we got married, but the circumstances were what they were, and I didn't want to be seen as an unpleasant woman. But what's done is done. However, when we started living together, my mother-in-law was very kind at first. She brought home cream puffs from the bakery I liked, and regarding household chores, she, being a housewife, would say, "You're working, so it's fine," and took on most of the work herself. She cooked every meal, but I could never get used to her taste. No matter what she cooked, the taste was always too strong. I heard that she was originally from the southern part of the country. I remember seeing on TV or reading somewhere that people from the South prefer salty foods. But that's just one example. Some of my coworkers from the South prefer less salty food. However, my mother-in-law's dish was beyond that level. When she made a stew, it was so black that I couldn't tell what the ingredients were. Of course, when I tasted it, it was like drinking barbecue sauce. She would say, "You need a strong flavor to help you eat your bread, right? Come on, Emily, have some more." I can't. It's too salty. When I glanced at Chris, he said, "Did you make it less salty today? Do you notice?" I wasn't sure about Emily's preference, so I made it a bit less salty. "What? Like this?" I was terrified. For a while, we continued to live like this, but my job started to suffer, perhaps because I was constantly eating my mother-in-law's cooking. My tongue was numb, and I couldn't taste anything. Luckily, I always had the head chef check my work at the end, and I never got any reprimands. However, feeling this wouldn't do, I started getting up earlier than my mother-in-law, at least for breakfast. That seemed to lessen my troubles during work. Strangely enough, my mother-in-law's attitude toward me turned increasingly frosty. She began to ignore my greetings. Then, she started criticizing the food I cooked. It's tasteless. Emily, don't forget to season just because you're busy. What's your game? Wait, what? Mother-in-law, I've seasoned it properly. Here, taste it. I had her taste it, but she retorted, "Your seasoning is bland. Can't you even understand that?" But adding more would be unhealthy. What's wrong with enjoying good food? Don't get too carried away just because you're good at cooking. With that, she poured an excessive amount of soy sauce over the dish I had prepared. I never got carried away. And I'm worried about our health here. I had an idea about what triggered this sudden change in my mother-in-law's attitude. It was something that happened at a birthday party for my sales daughter at our house. My husband has 2 sisters, both already married and living separately. They are both friendly people who said things like, "If you ever experience any bullying from your mother-in-law, let us know. We'll scold her for you." They've always been very kind to me, despite our brief acquaintance. Their husbands are also nice, gentle people. The older sister has a daughter, and we had her 5th birthday party at our house, where I helped mother-in-law with the cooking. The dining table was filled with various dishes. It was quite clear who made what. The party started, and my Sael said, "Our daughter really loves the omelette rice from the restaurant where Emily works. It's a dream come true to have it at home today. I'm happy to hear that. Actually, I'm in charge of making the omelette at work." When I replied, the birthday girl also praised me. "The food from the omelette lady is delicious." Watching this conversations, my mother-in-law was not amused. "Look, Grandma's stew is also delicious." She tried to get her granddaughter to eat her signature dish, but the little girl protested. "No! It hurts my mouth when I eat that." My sister's husbands, being considerate, did eat my mother-in-law's food, but after just a few bites, they asked me, "Sorry, could I get some more water?" Their water glasses were empty after just a few bites. "Hey, your seasoning has always been salty, but this is beyond common sense. Maybe Emily could teach you some cooking?" When my sister-in-law suggested this jokingly, my mother-in-law got angry and stormed out of the room, refusing to come back. I wished I hadn't cooked, but it was something my mother-in-law had asked me to do, and I couldn't do anything about it. The party ended early due to the tense atmosphere. My sister-in-law meant it as a joke, but it would hurt if the food you made was criticized. It must have been the same for my mother-in-law, who prepared the food hoping everyone would enjoy it. That night, I apologized to my mother-in-law. "I'm sorry if I overstepped." To which she replied, "Don't get too comfortable, you're just a freeloader." The next morning, the intense mother-in-law bullying started. My mother-in-law would douse the breakfast I prepared with seasoning, without even tasting it. If it was too brutal, it was disposed right in front of me. Naturally, I consulted my husband, Chris, about this. But he just said things like, "Aren't you being too cheeky? You should have just listened to what my mom said, or you're overthinking it," as if it was none of his business. To top it all off, despite us only being married for half a year, Chris started coming home later and later, often not returning until the date had changed. He kept using his work as an excuse, even skipping his niece's birthday party. That's the kind of man he was. Our marital life was falling apart. Of course, I thought about divorcing, but we had only been married for 6 months and I knew it would upset our parents, so I hesitated to take the plunge. Then one day, an event occurred that worsened the situation even further. My mother-in-law slipped on the stairs and injured her leg. My sister-in-law offered to come and help, but incredibly, my mother-in-law chose me. She said, "You're technically the wife, so you should at least do this much. It's outrageous that you're trying to rely on my daughter." From then on, I was being summoned by my mother-in-law even for trivial matters. She started contacting me even during work hours, causing me to ask for time off each time. My coworkers told me it was okay, but I felt guilty and eventually quit my job. My mother-in-law, as if she had been waiting for this moment, laughed at me saying, "Can't do your proud job anymore, how pitiful." From then on, not only during the day but also at night, I was suddenly summoned by my mother-in-law, and I had no time to rest. Even when I tried to talk to Chris, there were more and more days when he wouldn't come home. He said he was sleeping in his company's office, but I'm sure that was a lie. I had already made up my mind. However, I couldn't just leave without doing anything, so I decided to take revenge on them. Later on, while the three of us were having breakfast, I brought up the topic. "Please divorce me." They both looked surprised, saying, "What are you talking about? We haven't even been married for a year yet? It's you who'll be laughed at. Are you thinking I'm cheating? Ridiculous." "That's right. You're embarrassing us in public. Emily, you're really out of line." Even though I was made fun of by the two of them, I was not swayed and said, "Chris is not at home. My mother-in-law only knows how to bully her daughter-in-law. Who would want to live in such a house? I will divorce. My mind won't change." Seeing an unusually determined me, the two of them seemed panicked and Chris said, "We're sorry. I'll try to come home as early as possible. You can even go back to your parents' home for a while. But my mom has this leg issue. I have work, so could you stay here at least until her leg heals?" Chris said that, but it was probably hard for him to apologize, and that was clearly shown on his face. "I was not being very mature. I'm sorry. Can't you stay with us a bit longer? Your feelings might change." To which I replied, "Understood." The moment I said that, they both grinned as if to say, "She's easy." They are, indeed, a mother and a son. After that, the bullying stopped, and Chris started coming home earlier. But such peaceful times didn't last long. My husband, Chris, started coming home late again, and the harassment from my mother-in-law resumed. Mother-in-law's leg didn't heal at all, yet she frequently went out, claiming it to be a hospital visit. Finding this peculiar, I ended up discovering a shocking truth. A few days later, my cell phone was blowing up with calls. The callers were, of course, mother-in-law and Chris. When I answered the call from Chris, he said, "Hey, where the hell are you? What are you doing leaving my mom like this?" Chris, on the other end of the phone, was pretty furious. I didn't care whether this man was angry or not, so I replied, "Huh? I'm at my parents' house. What's wrong with that? It was you who told me I could go home." "What are you talking about? My mom's leg still isn't healed, right?" I heard someone making a ruckus in the background. I recognized the voice. It was mother-in-law. I said, "Anyway, I'm not going back to that house. Please contact me through a lawyer from now on," and hung up. For a while after that, I enjoyed some peaceful times. During my stay at my parents' house, they made lots of my favorite dishes. I also cooked for my parents, and when my mother said Emily's cooking is the best, I couldn't help but shed tears. A few days later, I received a call from a certain person. I was surprised to see the name displayed, because the caller was my detested mother-in-law. It was an apology for her past behavior and an invitation to her birthday party, which was to be held the next week. She insisted that I attend. The venue was a fancy restaurant near the station. The chef at the restaurant had recently changed, a man who had trained in France. It was a place that was becoming popular because you could taste authentic French cuisine. Of course, I was under no obligation to attend, but I thought it would be a good opportunity, so I agreed happily. Mother-in-law was overjoyed and sent me the date and time, insisting that I must come. On the day of the birthday party the following week, Chris and mother-in-law were already at the entrance of the restaurant. As soon as they saw me, he seemed to be smirking. The members were the same as the last party, 2 couples of sisters-in-law and their little girl. Including my mother-in-law, husband, and me, it's a total of 8. The sisters-in-law hadn't been told about the divorce yet, and I was asked to keep it a secret because they intended to tell them at the end of today's meal. In the middle of all this, the sisters-in-law and their husbands showed up. "Emily, long time no see. You look great." As always, they were kind. Once everyone had arrived, we entered the restaurant. As soon as we entered the restaurant, a waiter greeted us. "Is this a reservation for 7 people?" 7? We're 8, though. While I was thinking that, my mother-in-law loudly exclaimed, "The reservation is correct. It's for 7 people. We would like this person to be seated separately, please." Of course, this person referred to me. As proof, she grabbed my shoulder and pushed me forward. Looking back, the sisters-in-law and their husbands had a puzzled look on their faces, but my husband and mother-in-law were smirking. "Ah, so this was their plan. How silly." "Emily has a surprise, doesn't she?" said my mother-in-law. Who on earth tells about a surprise at their own birthday party? Ah, right in front of me. Well then, if she likes surprises so much, I'll happily give her one. "Emily, is that true?" The sisters-in-law looked worried, so I said, "That's right. I was trying to keep it a secret, but my mother-in-law figured it out. Excuse me, is there a vacant seat?" When I asked the waiter, he kindly guided me to a seat. The table was out of sight from my in-laws, which was nice because I didn't have to see those people. After that, the in-laws enjoyed their meal for a while. A kid's meal was prepared for the sister-in-law's daughter, and she was very happy, saying, "Amazing! This tastes just like my sister's omelette." The sisters-in-law also seemed to enjoy their food, saying it was delicious. For some reason, my mother-in-law was proud, saying, "See? Ever since the chef changed, the taste has improved significantly. The meat dishes after this are exquisite." She bragged proudly. In harmony with that, my husband nods in agreement. Next, it was finally time for the meat dish that my mother-in-law had been talking about to be served. A delicious-looking dish was placed in front of my Sael and her husband, but no matter how long we waited, no food was brought to my mother-in-law and husband. Growing impatient, they summoned the waiter and demanded, "What's going on here?" The loudness of my mother-in-law's voice echoed throughout the restaurant, something that seemed out of place in a fancy restaurant. Some customers even grimaced at the commotion. "The chef himself will be bringing your dishes. Please wait a little longer." When the waiter replied in this manner, my mother-in-law responded, "Oh really? Is it because we frequent this place so much?" She didn't seem completely displeased. "Sorry for the wait." They turned around as if to say, "We've been waiting." But upon seeing who brought their dishes, their eyes bulged out in shock. And no wonder. Standing in front of them, clad in a chef's coat, was me. "Wah! Emily! What are you doing?" "Aha! So that's what a surprise is. Emily, you're full of surprises." While the in-laws said this, my husband and mother-in-law had faces that said, this was not what we were expecting. I laid out the dishes without caring. "I made this especially for you, based on your preferences." The dish placed in front of my mother-in-law was a black lump doused in a plentiful amount of black sauce. Of course, it was thoroughly flavored with soy sauce. "For the final touch, please add this," I said, pouring extra soy sauce for her. She was shocked and froze on the spot. Furthermore, "We also have a special menu for this customer." I placed a plate in front of my husband, haphazardly lined with batteries ranging from size AA to D. "And for an additional flavor, please use this," I said, placing an entire bottle of soy sauce right in front of him. I said, placing an entire bottle of soy sauce right in front of him. Because he always harps on about work, I arranged batteries for my husband, who loves his job as an electrician. I even selected the most expensive batteries sold at other electronic stores, so I expect some gratitude. Seeing this, my niece were laughing hard. My sister-in-law and her husband had looks on their faces that said, "Isn't this a bit too much?" My mother-in-law and husband, with red faces, yelled, "You're making fools of us. And this restaurant, for allowing such a thing. Call the manager." As my husband said this, the manager appeared and said, "That would be me." "What the hell are you thinking? We are the customers here. We'll sue you." Hearing that, the manager replied simply, "Is that so? In that case, we'll be suing you too for disrupting our business." Huh? Was their response? It seems that the two of them frequently patronized this restaurant and had always acted arrogantly towards the staff. They had a reputation for nitpicking things like, "This is too bland," or "This has no flavor," and never considered the inconvenience they were causing other customers. They were well known as troublesome complainers. "We've tolerated it until now because you're family, but it seems we'll finally be able to distance ourselves. We won't hold back. Right, Emily?" "Yeah, big brother." Upon hearing this, the two of them looked surprised and turned their gazes towards us. Actually, this restaurant has been managed by my brother for some time now. My brother works in France, and he couldn't make it back home when I got married due to his busy schedule. Although he sent his congratulations, my mother-in-law and my husband, Bob, had never met him. Since my brother had been sent family photos, he knew what my mother-in-law and Bob looked like. "I apologize for not being able to attend your wedding. I wanted to reach out multiple times, but you both always had company." Upon hearing this, their faces turned pale. Feeling the conversation was getting long, my sisters-in-law told their husbands to head home first, then suggested, "Should we dig into this further?" They were smiling, but their eyes weren't. Seeing the usually cheerful two of them looking like that, it gave me a bit of a chill. "It's just business. You know, the old guys in the main street, they like these trendy places nowadays." Chris uttered this, and as he did, a waiter approached and handed over an earring saying, "Your guest left this behind last time. You're dining with men who wear earrings. Isn't that sketchy?" my sister-in-law commented. I couldn't help but laugh. "No, sister-in-law, this man has been having an affair with a woman who works at a florist across his shop." Chris's face turned ghostly pale. He looked at me as if asking how I knew, but I had hired a private investigator some time ago. My intuition was correct. Chris had been meeting the woman almost every day after work. This restaurant seemed to be her favorite, and they visited almost every week. Photos of them entering a hotel together and other evidences were plentiful. "I'm serious about her. Marrying you was a mistake. I'll gladly divorce you." Chris, who had been reluctant about divorce, had suddenly changed his stance. Of course, this was quite convenient for me, who wanted a divorce as soon as possible. "Sure, but I'll be claiming alimony, so make sure to pay. I just landed a big contract recently. I'll gladly pay," he laughed. "That's good to hear. Then about you, mother-in-law." Up until then, my mother-in-law, who had been silent, shivered. She was not as much of a regular here as Chris, but she was a regular nonetheless. "But I'm already a widow. It doesn't matter." Upon hearing her say this, I decided to share another fact. "I had the PI look into you as well, mother-in-law. Your relationship with your partner seems to be going on for about 5 years. But wait, didn't FIL pass away just last year?" "Wah!" Upon hearing this, my sisters-in-law glared at their mother in anger. No surprise there, the two sisters-in-law were closer to their late father than their mother. Learning the truth, they were furious. I was also surprised, but it seemed strange how detailed the PI was about my mother-in-law. Upon asking, it turns out my FIL had also hired the same investigator. You've been lying about Dad all along. And Chris, you're cheating on Emily. Are you two out of your minds? The sisters-in-law's anger showed no signs of cooling down. Seeing that it was disturbing other customers, we decided to disperse for the day and regroup at the in-laws' house another day. That day, I said goodbye to my brother and the staff with high fives. A few days later, the divorce papers were filled out in the presence of my two sisters-in-law. My husband, completely unapologetic, was saying things like, "Well, just don't regret it, huh?" Really, despite my poor mobility, I ended up with such an outrageous wife, he grumbled. Tired of his incessant complaints, I shouted, "Watch your step, mother-in-law," and she jumped, exclaiming, "What?" Indeed, her leg was perfectly healed. Even though it was healed, she continued to pretend it was painful just to torment me. Such a spiteful woman she was. But, to me, she was now nothing more than a stranger. And so, my married life ended in less than a year. I didn't regret it at all. Later, alimony for both my ex-husband and the woman was deposited into my account. Since it was deposited simultaneously, I assume my husband paid for the woman's portion too, but that's beside the point. As for the pair afterwards, despite going into debt to pay the alimony, my husband was promptly dumped after the divorce. I later learned from my sister-in-law that the woman was infamous in her hometown as a homewrecker. My ex-husband had bragged about landing a big contract, but as it turns out, the day we were at the restaurant, there were mostly regular customers, and upon us leaving the restaurant after having to deal with the complaining couple, applause erupted, my brother told me. By the way, I was told by my brother that there were only reservation off 7, so I figured there was no place for me to begin with, which is why I had though of this plan. Of course, they're now banned from the restaurant. Word of their misconduct had spread, and it seems they lost that big contract. They deserve it, I suppose. It's an electronics store that seems to run on trust. Prospering in the future will likely be difficult. As for my mother-in-law, she was dumped too, and on top of that, when she went to the hospital due to poor health, it was found that her long-term dietary habits were to blame and that even with treatment, her body would never return to normal. She deserved this as well. As for me, I've returned to work at the Western-style restaurant I used to work at. Despite the trouble I had caused, they warmly welcomed me back. "Hey, omelette lady!" My sisters-in-law still frequently visit the restaurant. They've cut ties with their mother and brother since that incident. They couldn't forgive them for neglecting me, who they had treated like a little sister and deceived their father the whole time. And they have no intention of forgiving them in the future. Despite everything, I'm happiest when I'm cooking. I'm the happiest I've ever been right now. Well, everyone apparently are uneducated. Plain Jane of the DIL will be singing for us. Come on, get on stage already, you ugly duckling. My MIL snickered. It was my SIL's wedding reception, and she ordered me to perform a solo. As usual, my MIL always finds a way to belittle me. Her audacity to humiliate me even on such a joyous occasion as my SIL's wedding is beyond my comprehension. What's taking so long? Hurry up. She's getting impatient, her voice hardening. Okay then, I will. Excuse me. I stood up from my seat and slowly headed towards the stage. My name is Erica, 33 years old. I live in a house with my 4-year-old daughter, Janice, and my husband, Paul, who's the same age as me. We're in our 8th year of marriage. I lost my parents when I was a child and was raised by my grandparents thereafter. However, I didn't want to be a burden to them anymore, so I dropped out of high school and got a job at a local factory. Paul and I went to the same high school, and we were reconnected at a reunion when we were 21. We hit it off and started dating. 3 years after Paul graduated from university, we got married. I've been supporting my husband, taking care of household chores, and raising our daughter while working part-time since our marriage. Mom, teach me how to sing. Recently, Janice has been asking me that quite a lot. Neither Paul nor I have any intention of forcing music onto her. I like music. I was the president of the choir club in high school. I still love singing and even take voice training lessons as a hobby. When both Paul and I are at home, I often sing to his music, and perhaps that's why Janice naturally developed an interest in music. I want to sing beautifully like you do, Mom. Seeing her say this with a smile, I can't help but smile back. When I told Paul about this, he reacted with joy, saying, "It's a blessing that she's enjoying music." However, we agreed that it would be better for a professional to teach her the basics of singing, and decided to take her to the voice trainer I often visit the next day. I hope that one day Janice and I can perform together with Paul's music. With these happy thoughts in mind, I fell asleep that day. 3 days later, when I returned home after shopping, my MIL called. She started belittling me ever since she found out I dropped out of high school when I got married to Paul. To be honest, she isn't my favorite person. She often showers me with insults like, "Can't you even do that? You're so slow. Your parents were no good, huh? That's why you dropped out of high school, isn't it?" I wonder if she's going to say something nasty again. With feelings of apprehension, I answered a call from my MIL. "Hello? Is Janice there right now?" "I'm sorry, she's at voice training right now. She's not home." After I said that, I realized I had let something slip, but it was too late. Why didn't you tell me before letting her attend such things? You really don't think things through. I'll teach her. My MIL, just like my husband, Paul, graduated from a prestigious music academy as valedictorian. She's quite the accomplished musician. She dotes on our daughter and treats her with so much love. However, maybe because she was a valedictorian, she tends to take a condescending tone when it comes to music and education. Paul and his sister were both rigorously taught about music by her in the past, to the point where they began to despise it. I'm certain it would be the same even with her granddaughter. It would be a problem if Janice, who had just started taking interest in music, begins to hate it because of the condescending way it's taught. Mother-in-law, I appreciate your offer, but I want Janice to have her freedom in this. She won't improve if she's just playing around. Make her quit right now. Even if you say that, it's really up to Janice. I can't force her to quit. I'm sure it would be much better if I taught her. With that, she abruptly ended the call. 3 months passed, and I had almost forgotten about the incident when my MIL decided to visit our home. It's been a while, hasn't it? Oh, how's Janice been doing? She was probably happy to see her granddaughter after such a long time. As soon as she stepped into our home, she immediately scooped Janice into her arms, barely greeting us. It just so happened that Janice had the day off from her voice training class and the whole family was at home. Granny! I've become good at singing! Janice exclaimed, boasting to her grandmother. Really? Could you sing something for me then? I was worried about what my MIL might say to Janice, so I intervened. How about we eat first before we hear her sing? It's lunchtime after all. Since it was noon, I tried to distract her by saying that, but don't interrupt when she's about to sing for me. My MIL dismissed my suggestion with a single comment. I'm sorry, Janice dear. Can you sing for me? My MIL asked. Hearing her say that, Janice began to sing. From the perspective of a MIL who graduated as the valedictorian of a music conservatory, my daughter's singing must sound rather clumsy. I had a sinking feeling inside me, worried that my daughter might get some snide remarks from her. However, my MIL applauded and praised my daughter, saying, "You did well. You've practiced a lot," far from making any sarcastic comments. "Thank you, Grandma." My daughter seemed happy to be praised by her grandmother. I sighed in relief, thinking that even my strict MIL wouldn't make snide remarks to her granddaughter. "I thought Mom might say something, so I was a little scared," Paul whispered to me with a look of relief on his face. Nothing particular happened after that, but as the evening came, I realized that Janice had fallen asleep. "Excuse me, mother-in-law, since Janice fell asleep, I'm going to take her to her room." I picked up Janice and carried her to her bedroom. After I put my daughter to bed, I returned to the living room. As soon as I returned to the living room, my MIL said to me, "Didn't you think that Janice's singing today was terrible, Erica? It's a waste of money to let her go to a class that can only teach her to that level. I'll teach her myself." I guess that was what she thought after hearing my daughter's singing today. But as I said before, we can't decide that without hearing what Janice has to say. If you keep saying such soft things, that's all she will ever be able to sing. My MIL seemed to have no intention of listening to me whatever I might have to say. I asked Paul to say something, but when it came to music, he couldn't stand up to his mother and he fell silent. About 5 minutes of silence followed, and it was Paul who gave in and said, "All right, Mom, go ahead and teach Janice to sing for a while." Hearing those unbelievable words from Paul's mouth, my mind went blank. Is this some kind of joke? Won't they care how Janice feels? After all, she has been so happy to be interested in music. What if Janice hates music because she's taught so strictly by her grandmother? Wait a minute, isn't that a bit too selfish? I confronted Paul as anger welled up within me. What can we do? When it comes to music, she's much better than me, and it's a fact that I got better by being taught by her. I was so angry that I felt like waking up Janice right at the moment and leaving the house with her. So, I guess it means Janice is quitting the voice training class as I said, right? My MIL, with a triumphant look on her face, asked Paul and me. All right. But remember, this is not a music conservatory, so please absolutely do not do anything that Janice would dislike. I know that, you know. I'm not undereducated like you. I said what I had to say at least, knowing she'd never back off, and I let her go home for the day. That night, my husband apologized for his mother's behavior, but I did not even want to see his face. I ignored him and went to bed. Next morning, I told my daughter Janice, from today, instead of going to the voice training class, let's have Grandma teach you to sing here at home, all right? When she heard it, she looked very sad, but said nothing and just nodded. I'm sorry. Seeing her like that, all I could do was apologize. Then, come noon, my MIL arrived at our home. Janice, starting today, Grandma is going to teach you to sing even better. She said this to my daughter with a smile. No sooner had the lesson started than my MIL's teaching style became more and more strict within an hour. You're wrong. You're making the same mistake at the same place. Do it again. That's why I didn't want her to teach. I knew it would turn out like this. Mother-in-law, this isn't what we agreed to, is it? Could you be a bit gentler? What are you talking about? I am being gentle. Don't interfere. Why don't you quietly do some housework that you can hardly handle? 4 hours passed, and at last, my MIL's lesson ended. Well, see you tomorrow. Remember to practice what we did today. With that, she left, seemingly pleased with herself. If I'm going to get yelled at this much, I don't want to sing anymore. Seated in her chair, Janice said to me. I harbored an intense hatred for my mother-in-law, like I'd never felt before, for taking away what my daughter enjoyed and only caring about her own satisfaction. This cannot go on. I won't let my MIL have her way. Her singing lessons continued in the days that followed. However, after about a week, Janice told me, I don't want Grandma to teach me anymore. I don't want to sing. Given my MIL's way of teaching, I thought it couldn't be helped. You don't have to force yourself. If you want to quit, that's okay too. You don't want to go back to the voice training class? It was something she had started because she wanted to. And I, for my part, wanted her to continue, so I asked her that. If it's that class. It seemed that Janice hadn't come to hate singing itself. It appears that the harsh words from her grandmother and the lack of praise, even when she felt she did well, were making it unenjoyable for her. Why don't you go back to your voice training lessons and give it another shot? I asked Janice. As if she hadn't been upset moments before, she perked up and nodded enthusiastically. So, I'm sorry to say this to you, grandmother, but from tomorrow, Janice will be returning to her original voice training classes. The next day, I relayed Janice's feelings to her grandmother over the phone. How can she whine about giving up after just a week? Isn't it your fault for raising such a weak-minded child? Well, it might be. But even though you graduated top of your class from a prestigious music college, it seems that's the only way you know how to teach. Janice told me that she preferred her voice training teacher. As I retorted, the grandmother was fussing and fuming over the phone, but I ignored her and hung up. Whether she was top of her class or not, it was quite satisfying that her own teaching method had led to her being disliked by her granddaughter, who preferred her voice training teacher. After that, the visits from the grandmother ceased. I've spoken to your mother and told her it was okay if she didn't come to teach anymore. Janice said she didn't want it anymore either. I also feel like I've done something unforgivable to Janice. Back in the day, my mother was very strict with me about music, so I couldn't say anything. But I thought she wouldn't be so harsh on her granddaughter. I'm really sorry. That night, when I relayed this to my husband, Paul, he seemed deeply regretful and apologized. I was so angry when Paul suggested quitting Janice's voice training class and having the grandmother teach her instead that I almost felt like punching him. But fortunately, Janice didn't come to hate music, so I decided to forgive him. 2 weeks later, Paul said, "My sister is getting married in a month and she asked us to perform." I had never performed at someone else's wedding before. What kind of performance is she expecting? I was planning to bring a few people from my band and do a small concert, but my sister really wants you and my mother to sing as well. I wasn't particularly thrilled about the idea, but hearing that the grandmother would also be performing, I reluctantly accepted Paul's suggestion. So, does that mean I'll be singing with your mother? Well, yeah, that's how it seems. Singing with my MIL, of all people. I wondered if it would be all right. But if I happen to sing better than her at this performance, I wonder what she'll say. I started practicing the very next day, but there was no sign of my MIL practicing at all. Mother, aren't you going to practice? I'm fine. I'm much better than you even without practicing. After all, practice is something that people like you, who are not very good, need to do. I tried asking because I was curious, but the only response from my MIL was sarcasm. I decided it was a waste of time to engage with her and focused on my own preparations. After we decided what song to perform, I also increased the frequency to get my voice training sessions. I was sick of being ridiculed by my MIL, and above all, I was anxious about singing in public after such a long time without proper training. and on the day of my Sael's wedding. The ceremony went smoothly, and the time for the entertainment had finally come. First, my husband, Paul, took the stage and began to play his music. As expected, given he plays regularly, he was confident and exuded an elegant aura. I was utterly mesmerized by Paul's performance. "I'm not feeling well today. Could you sing on your own?" Then, out of the blue, my Amael told me to sing solo. "What? That's so sudden. It's not fair." "Well, there's nothing we can do about it." "Or what? Are you too embarrassed to sing in front of others because you're uneducated and ugly?" She said this without a hint of remorse. Okay. I know it, she's doing this on purpose, I thought, and decided to retort. Being uneducated and ugly, I've practiced hard so I won't be embarrassed singing in front of others. I asked you several times if you needed to practice, but you showed no signs of doing so. Could it be that you're actually a terrible singer? That's not true. My MIL raised her voice in response to my question. The people around us began to stir, wondering what was going on. Sorry, it's nothing. I got up from my seat, apologized to those around me, and then pressed my MIL further. Graduating as valedictorian from the music college, you sure talk big about teaching others, huh? Are you running away because you're embarrassed to sing with me since I'm better? I whispered this in her ear. What did you say? There's no way that's true. If I sing with a low-educated, ugly person like you, it would only throw me off. Didn't your parents teach you that? You and your parents are truly incompetent. She disparaged me as being uneducated and ugly, and even insulted my parents in front of everyone. Embarrassed and angry, I wanted to leave right at the moment. But if I ran away now, it would just make her happy. What are you doing just sitting there? Hurry up and go! Okay then, I will. Excuse me. Just as Paul's performance ended, I took his place on stage. I was supposed to sing with my mother-in-law, but due to her not feeling well, I'll be singing solo. Instead of the song I was supposed to sing with her, I chose an opera song I used to sing a lot when I was competitive, an aria from The Marriage of Figaro. And so, I began to sing. At that moment, perhaps due to the vocal training I had done, my condition was excellent, and I was able to produce the most beautiful vibrato I'd ever achieved. It was amazing. The audience were mesmerized by my singing, saying things like, "Wow, her voice is incredible." And is she a professional? When I finished singing my song without any hitches, the audience gave me a standing ovation, showering me with thunderous applause. Congrats on your wedding, sister-in-law. You know, I used to be the choir leader in high school. It's been a few years since I last sang in front of an audience, so I was a bit nervous. How did I do? Thanks so much for listening. After making this statement, I returned to my seat. My daughter, all starry-eyed, pleaded, "Mom, your voice was so beautiful. Can you teach me next time?" Witnessing this, my MIL, with her jealousy on full display, said in a humph, "Anyone can sing like that. Don't get ahead of yourself." She continued, never missing a chance to belittle my singing. Just as I thought the entertainment segment was over, my Sael unexpectedly said, "MIL, you should sing too." Words that I didn't expect came out from my Sael. My MIL was taken aback and looked at her daughter in confusion, asking, "Me? I've never heard you sing, Mom, and since you taught me so much about music when I was young, I'd really love to hear you sing." My Sael expressed this with pure honesty. The attendees chimed in, "Mael, you should definitely sing." Words had gotten around that my MIL was the top graduate from a prestigious music school, and the crowd grew increasingly excited for her performance, creating an atmosphere where she felt she had to sing. "Well, with all this, I guess you have to sing now, don't you?" I did not hesitate to add so.
All right. If you insist,"
she responded, heading to the stage. The moment my MIL took the stage, the energy in the room peaked. But as she began to sing,
"Wait, no way.
I might even be a better singer," such murmurs could be heard throughout the crowd. She must have heard them as well. My MIL's voice did seem off, but even accounting for that, her singing was dreadful. She always criticized others for their singing, but her pitch was all over the place. Honestly, I felt I was still the better singer. The atmosphere grew awkward as her performance ended. Unlike when I sang, the venue was filled with cold atmosphere, and the applause was sparse. Everyone acted as if they had seen something they shouldn't have, as if her turn had never happened. Upon returning to our table, my MIL, her face flushed red, shouted at me, "That's why I didn't want to sing."
If you had sung properly, my daughter wouldn't have asked me to do this."
She said it to me with such an Angie tone, but I didn't understand why. When Mysael asked her mother to sing, it seemed to me that she genuinely wanted the wedding to be blessed by the voice of her mother, who had been sternly teaching her about music since her childhood. Do you think so? To me, it seemed she genuinely wanted you to sing. I told my honest thought to my MIL.
"No way. I'm sure she knew I'm bad at singing, and this is her way of embarrassing me."
I was utterly astonished at her response. She had always criticized others' music and performances, yet she herself didn't want to sing in public because she's bad at it. She never hesitates to complain about others' music, but she is like, "I don't accept complaints although I'm a bad singer myself." Such self-centered attitude won't be accepted. My daughter, Janice, might have her newfound love for music crushed by her grandmother. I could no longer bear my MIL's attitude. So, a person who studied at a prestigious music school and criticizes others' music is just doing so because she can only sing this badly? But mother-in-law, isn't it great? You were able to sing alone without having to sing with a terrible singer like me. I responded to my MIL with a sarcastic tone.
"How dare you say that? It's your fault that I had to embarrass myself."
It's not nice to say that in front of your daughter. I'm sure she's satisfied hearing her mother singing. As I spoke these words, my MIL fell silent. There was a stir amongst those who heard what I had said to my MIL, but other than that, the ceremony went on smoothly and ended without any problems. 2 days after the ceremony, my MIL stormed into our house.
"I just can't let it go. I want you to apologize for what had happened."
I was surprised by her sudden visit, but I retorted, "What exactly am I supposed to apologize for? I wasn't aware that your singing was that bad. Instead, I think you owe us an apology." I replied.
"What do you mean? I have absolutely nothing to apologize for. It's your fault I was forced to sing that song I hated and embarrass myself."
No, not to me. To Janice. Because of you, Janice almost came to hate the music she had started to enjoy. Even though you graduated from a prestigious music school, why would you torment a child who has developed an interest in music just because things didn't go your way? Is that what you learned from your music school? I haven't received any musical training from you, yet I was able to sing at the reception and even received applause. How about you, MIL? Shall I give you some singing lessons? I'll teach you thoroughly. My MIL was speechless hearing what I said.
"If you have nothing else to discuss, please leave. I won't tolerate you interfering with our daughter or my husband's music anymore."
Upon hearing this, my MIL left our home without another word, her shoulders slumped in defeat. I felt a sense of satisfaction from being able to retaliate so fiercely in her of expertise, music. It was indeed worth continuing my voice training since my youth. Without the voice training, I might not have been able to receive such applause at my Asael's wedding reception. I wonder how my MIL, who has always boasted about graduating top of her class from a prestigious music school, felt being scolded this way by someone like me who only has a high school diploma and was just a choir member. To be honest, I felt a sense of poetic justice towards my MIL. I thought, serves her right, she shouldn't act so haughty anymore. It's been a month since that wedding ceremony of my Sael, and now my MIL occasionally visits our house, but she doesn't complain about my daughter's singing anymore. I actually didn't mind my MIL visiting since she did not say anything about music anymore. My daughter, Janice, who has improved a lot in her singing recently, is challenging a slightly difficult song given as an assignment in her class. "Mom, this song is hard, but I'll try to sing it beautifully," she declared, practicing enthusiastically.
That's great, you do your best. You'll definitely do well.
Although I love singing, don't know much about the technical aspects, so I had no idea what was difficult about the song. But seeing my daughter working so hard, that's all I could say. On that day, my MIL, who happened to be visiting our house, observed the interaction between me and Janice and said,
"Erica, this song is not something you can handle by just doing your best. Janice, listen well. You should do it like this."
It was incredibly kind and patient of her, which was unimaginable given how she used to be, to explain until Janice understood.
"Oh, thank you, Grandma. It's easier to sing now,"
Janice said as she listened intently to her grandmother's advice, working hard to master her assignment.
"Erica, I used to look down on everyone doing music without graduating from a music college. But after meeting someone like you who can sing so beautifully without a music degree, I changed my mind. After all, we should enjoy music. Could you teach me to sing next time?"
My mother-in-law said that, looking at Janice singing. I was surprised to hear such a thing all of a sudden, but I'm sure the sarcastic comment I made after my Sael's wedding had its effect. "My lessons are tough, you know?" I grinned as I replied to my mother-in-law.
"Oh, I won't do anything horrible anymore. I feel sorry for Paul, too, although it's too late now. But if you're going to be tough, Erica, I'm prepared."
After hearing that from my MIL, I felt assured that she won't say anything about her music anymore. Although a lot had happened, the tension between my MIL and me eased off, and since then we've often gone to karaoke together, becoming close enough to sing together. I hope that one day, when Janice becomes even better at singing, the four of us, me, Paul, Janice, and my MIL, can have a fun jam session.